want to move my wine again, Yada. Yeah. Put on in there. Quick. Yada.
So what are we making today?
Apple pie filling. Apple pie filling. Apple pie filling.
So today we're going to make some apple pie filling. So we've got some Granny Smith apples. You can use a lot of different varieties. This is just what's close to us and what we'll be using today. We've got our jars sterilizing on the stove. We've already juiced our lemons. So we've got, instead of adding a splash of lemon juice to our water, I just add all the rinds and any of the little pulp and stuff like that to it. So we're going to start peeling our apples, and as we dice them, we're going to put them in here. You can dice or slice apples for apple pie filling, whichever you prefer. So let's get going. It can be a little bit messy. It's best to do it outside, but if you're like us and can't do it outside for the day, you can go ahead and do it in your kitchen. Just go ahead and plan on having to scrub your floors and clean everything up. We've gone ahead and cored some. Jenny's going to keep peeling rather, some of them. Our peeler doesn't get all of them. Some peelers are better than others. But from here, we're just going to quarter it. We'll cut out the core and the seeds, and then we'll just slice them. You can do slices or you can do dices, whichever you really prefer. I think the nice long apple slices look really nice in apple pies. So that's what we'll be doing. And just cutting off any of the extra peels. Now we're going to be saving our peels to do apple cider vinegar with them.
Go back.
Once you have your slices, we're just going to put those in the lemon water. It keeps them from browning. You don't have to, but it is a nice thing, just aesthetically pleasing. Once you have about 6 quarts of apple sliced up, we're going to start getting the pie filling going. So we've added all of our ingredients except for the lemon juice here on the stove. We're going to start heating it up. Once it gets to a boil, we're going to boil it for a full minute and then add our lemon juice. So this is what it'll start off looking like. It's really important that instead of using cornstarch, you're actually using Clear Jel. Clear Jel is just a cooking type of cornstarch. It can tolerate really high temperatures and still stay at a good consistency. Cornstarch is currently not recommended for making pie fillings with or canning to any extent with. So we're using Clear Jel. We're going to heat this up and get it to a boil. Once it's at a good boil for a minute, we're going to add the lemon juice and bring it back up to a boil for another minute. You'll see as it comes to a boil, it gets nice and thick. Just make sure you're stirring really good. And then we're going to add our lemon juice. So we got our jars packed. I would have showed you more of it, but you kind of have to move fast because that Clear Jel really starts to set once you add the lemon juice. So the quicker you can get it into your jars, the better after that. You'll leave a 1 inch, maybe even a 1 1/4 inch head space. Apple pie filling is notorious for siphoning. If you don't know what siphoning is, it's basically where the contents of the jar will seep out while it's either cooking or when you remove it to cool off. So we're gonna water bath this, and then I will show you what they look like. We've got the last of our apple pie filling going on the stove, and I've pretty much cleaned up the kitchen so we can start all over and do this again tomorrow. Usually it only takes us a day, but with filming I figured it would just be easier to do one day of showing y'all how to do it and then spend the next day just working. So what's left for today is really just our scraps. You can feed them to your animals if you'd like, or you can use them. For us, we like to make apple cider vinegar with them. So I've got a wide mouth, 1/2 gallon size jar here. If you're fermenting it, you can ferment it in any size jar. It's really important though that if you're using weights like I am, they're just little fermenting weights. It's essentially just a little piece of glass that you can slide down into the jar. They're not that expensive, and in my opinion, they're well worth the investment. So you fill the jar about 2/3 of the way up with apple scraps. It can be the cores or the peels. If you're using peels, especially from store-bought apples, make sure you clean them really good before you use them. I wouldn't recommend using something that you know has been sprayed with chemicals. That's just my personal preference. So you fill it up about 2/3 of the way. For every cup of water that your container holds, you're going to add 1 tablespoon of sugar. For the 1/2 gallon size jar, we're going to add 1/2 of a cup. That's 8 tablespoons of sugar. And then we're just gonna add some warm water. We don't want it really hot, really just warm enough to help dissolve the sugar. And then we'll put our fermenting weight on there. It slides right in. And then we'll use a lid, just a ring, and one of these filters. This is actually a filter we use for our dairy cow's milk, but it works really good for fitting over top of this. And I can just screw on a band and it holds it down. If your band won't slide down over this, you can use rubber bands for it, but I found that some of the older rings especially will just slide down right over top of it. From here, we'll put this in a relatively dark corner in the kitchen. You don't want it in direct sunlight, so just keep that in mind when you're placing it. And you will have to, what we consider burping it every now and then. It's basically just shaking your jar to get any of the air bubbles that get trapped down here at the bottom out. And you do want to keep an eye on it to make sure that these apple pieces, especially if you're using the scraps, that they're not floating to the top or coming, into the air at the very top of the jar here. So as long as it's under that weight and submerged under the water, you're just fine. Now be careful when you fill this. I wouldn't fill it any more than about 1 inch to the top because it can foam up. I'll probably leave about 1.5 inches to be honest. And you'll want to keep a close eye on it because if it overflows, it really makes a mess. So from here, we're going to go ahead and get this going. I just have to add water to it and stir it a little bit, and then we'll wait 3 to 4 weeks. At the 3 to 4 week mark, you'll take your apples out. Now for us, we do it with what they consider with the mother. That essentially means that we don't strain everything in this. So if you want it strained or without the mother, then you'll send it through a strainer, get rid of the apples and any of these larger pieces. I don't even know that you consider them larger pieces. They're really just particles that are in it. This is one from last year. If you see on the bottom here, it's just like the store-bought apple cider vinegar with mother in it. You'll have to shake it before you use it. We use this for mostly like deviled eggs and things like that we cook. I do not use it for canning though. If you're looking at making this to use in your own canning, I just want to let you know it's not recommended to do that, mostly because you don't know the acidity level of your own apple cider vinegar. I'm sure there's probably a way you can test it, but for us, I just buy the store-bought apple cider vinegar for canning. I do prefer the homemade apple cider vinegar for eating in any of our like deviled eggs and any of those recipes, but also for just our general health. If we're drinking any, I'd much rather drink this than the store-bought, and that's just a personal preference. When you get to the 3 to 4 week, before you filter this out, you'll want to taste it some just to see if you like it. If you want it to be stronger, you can store it a little bit longer and it'll ferment and get a little bit stronger. The shorter time period you give, the less strong it'll be. Alright, so from here, this one is ready. I'm just going to find a dark corner in the kitchen and put it in, but I did want to mention that it's really important to always start with sterilized jars, and anytime you handle anything in this, you want to make sure you wash your hands really good. Anytime you ferment, you're essentially growing bacteria. You don't want to add or introduce any bad bacteria into this, so it's really important to wash your hands and use sterilized jars. And your fermenting weights. If you don't know that, you need to sterilize those as well. You do the same as you do jars, just boil them for a couple minutes and they'll be perfectly fine.